Some St. Johns County leaders are scratching their heads. A Florida bill that just became law July 1st seemingly sneaked by them, and it's going to impact the county in a big way by basically bypassing the county's approval process for development of large neighborhoods. And now some of those St. Johns County leaders are wondering why. Why didn't the lobbying firm the county paid to inform them of big legislative issues let the county leaders know about this expansive development change? Jessica Clark has been digging into this, and Jess, it might be a case of conflict of interest.
Well, some of the county commissioners certainly are saying that, and while a conflict of interest may not be illegal, it is raising some eyebrows.
It's horrible for the people of this county.
It is a challenge for us locally.
And it takes the voice of our residents away. So it's infuriating.
These three St. Johns County commissioners have strong words for what was Florida Senate Bill 686. It is now the agricultural enclave law.
It completely takes home rule away.
The new law essentially allows developers to apply for a designation called an agricultural enclave. And if an undeveloped piece of land meets the state law's new criteria for that designation, that it's surrounded by a certain amount of development, that piece of land can be developed, regardless if the project meets local approval requirements for construction.
It feels like a preemption, like they're doing an end around.
The Florida legislature passed the agricultural enclave law this past March, but some of the St. Johns County commissioners had not heard about the bill until months later.
I heard about it in our meeting in May.
I think it was in May.
Well, I found out about 686 when the legislature passed it.
St. Johns County hired 3 lobbying firms last year. One of them, the Fiorentino Group, which now goes by the Florida Group, was contractually hired at $96,000 a year to specifically keep the county abreast of issues at the legislative and state level.
We rely on the lobbying group to let us know what is coming down from Tallahassee.
But St. Johns County Commissioners Krista Joseph, Ann Taylor, and Clay Murphy said the lobbying firm did not inform them about the agricultural enclave bill when it was moving through the legislature.
So I really want to know why we weren't warned of this.
I was not contacted by anybody. I had no idea about SB 686 as far as from our lobbying company or anybody.
Murphy is not as upset with the Florida Group Lobbyist.
I would love to be able to point the finger at somebody and say it was their fault, but ultimately the responsibility was mine to know, and I didn't.
The Florida Group declined an on-camera interview, but sent us a statement saying it has represented St. Johns County for 15 years and has secured $110 million in state funding for county projects. It did not respond to my questions about whether or not it told the commission about Senate Bill 686. But the Florida Group did say we did not advocate for passage of SB 686. When you look at the firm's list of clients on its website, it includes major developers such as Hudson Companies, which is building Silverleaf and is tied to former Senator Travis Hudson. Another client of the Florida Group is a developer called the Park Group. It has developed Nocatee, and the Park Group stands to benefit from this new law because the Park Group has placed a request through the new agricultural enclave law to build on more than 4,400 acres north of Nocatee up to Ponte Vedra.
That's a conflict of interest.
You do think that it is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean,
and why?
if they're lobbying for us and we don't want overdevelopment, and they're also lobbying for the developers, that doesn't sound like it's going to be in our favor.
I think it's a complete conflict of interest. You cannot represent our county and then at the same time represent developers.
According to the application, the Fiorentino Group, now the Florida Group, filed when trying to win the bid to be the county's lobbyist. The company signed a document saying there was no conflict of interest.
I would like to look at their conflict of interest and how we go forward.
The Florida Group statement to First Coast News said, our firm upholds the highest ethical standards and we are careful to avoid any conflicts of interest. If you look at the tiny print in the supplemental application documents the lobbying firm gave to the county, the firm does list its clients.
All right, we have a motion and a second, so go ahead and vote.
In February 2025, the county commission, made up of the current county commissioners, approved the Fiorentino or Florida Group's contract.
That passes unanimously, 5-0.
And when I asked Taylor about approving the contract,
So you approve those?
Absolutely.
Contracts?
Yeah, I wish we could go back in time. Trust me, I wish we could go back in time. Very interested in taking a closer look at the contract and just the breakdown in communication. And
As for Murphy, he has a more reserved view when it comes to the question about conflict of interest with the lobbying firm.
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. I know that all of the major lobbying groups have clients that could be considered on both sides of something.
It's very common, especially with big lobbying firms, to represent multiple agencies and businesses that often do business together.
Political analyst John Daigle says lobbying firms can have internal methods to handle clients with opposing views. Currently, we don't know if the Florida group does. As for the question regarding the conflict of interest with St. Johns County,
I don't think there's any laws or ethical rules that say the Florida group had to make them aware of it. You might argue they should have, but again, it also comes back to whether you consider this development bad for St. Johns County or good for St. Johns County, and there are people on both sides of that issue.
There certainly are, but many residents and at least 2 county commissioners argue the lobbyist should have told them about this bill that could greatly impact their county's developmental approval powers. I have reached out to the other 2 county commissioners not mentioned in this story for their thoughts, and they have not responded. Jeannie?